Drake is a name synonymous with hip hop royalty. He's won Grammy after Grammy, had chart topping hit after chart topping hit. And for nearly 15 years, he's been a constant in my playlist. But then came Certified Lover Boy and Honestly Nevermind. Albums that to me felt like a departure from the Drake that I became such a big fan of. Both had extremely long track lists, and they had very few memorable moments. And they even made me question, was my Drake fandom misplaced? Now, enter For All the Dogs, where Drake promised to return to his old self. And that got me real hyped for this album. But sadly, For All the Dogs did not meet the expectations I had. Now, don't get me wrong, there were moments of brilliance, but they were overshadowed by a pattern that's become all too familiar in recent years. Pattern uninspired tracks that don't quite hit the mark. From start to finish, For All the Dogs is a challenging listen. Sonically, it's a treat to my ears. The production is through the roof with twists and beat shifts that keep you on your toes. But here's the catch. It lacks a cohesive story, an edge, a story that trends through the entire album. It took me not only one listen, but multiple listens to get past even the initial tracks. However, for you all, I have decided that I want to give you a full breakdown of this album. Now, let's start from the beginning. The album starts off with Virginia Beach, a pretty typical Drake intro. Melodic R&B samples, heavy bass that resonates deep. But at first, I ain't gonna lie, I wasn't too sold. But as with many of the Drake tracks, it grew on me and even gave me some moments that had me feeling like this was the old Drake. The track is laced with a lot of passive-aggressive lines about women, which kind of becomes a recurring theme throughout this entire album. And sadly, the ending of this song left me really to question, like, which version of Drake are we getting, with some pretty lackluster bars, as you can see on your screen. The misery continued as I go to the next track, Amen, featuring Tizo Touchdown. Now, this track is a play on words where it's about a woman praying for amen. Clever? I don't know. But it feels kinda off. Drake using religious undertones just didn't sit right with me. It was definitely a huge swing, but it was surely a miss for me. And speaking of misses, let's transition to Calling for You, featuring none other than 21 Savage, who Drake has always had excellent chemistry with. Now, the more I dove into this track, the more it felt kind of like a throwaway, a leftover from the Her Lost sessions. The drill beat, while it was intriguing, couldn't mask the song's shortcomings. Lackluster lyrics and these weird sort of sound effects, it felt like Drake was kind of experimenting with something, but the experiment failed. And then there's this weird interlude in the middle where a woman who clearly has been flued out a time or two is complaining about a vacation. Kind of weird, right? But most of all, she was real disrespectful towards Oxtails, which honestly took me completely away from the rest of the song. However, 21 Savage was able to save this song just a little bit. His verse, especially after the beat switch, was kind of alright. The song, it's a little bit of a roller coaster, and it definitely was not one of my favorite tracks. Now, on to one of the more intriguing tracks of the album, Fear Heights. Now, this is a very interesting song just because of the way Drake starts it out. He kicks it off with a question to the world. Why do they make it sound like I'm still hung up on you? While he proceeds to still be hung up on someone. And not just anyone. I'm talking about Rihanna, where he begins to reference the word anti, which is a clear nod to the classic Rihanna album. And then he even makes a bold claim where he says that he's been with women, in his words, are better than who we're led to believe is Rihanna. I don't know about all that. But the song continues, and he don't even stop with throwing shade at Rihanna. He then proceeds to talk about her man, ASAP Rocky, where he decides to compare his wealth and the success and the hits. And I understand that, Drake, you lost out on one of the baddest of all time. But Rihanna and ASAP Rocky got a family together, got a whole life together. So this begs the question, Drake. Why? Why? Dude, it's time to let it go. My thoughts on Drake needing to let it go continues as the next song after Fear Heights is Daylight. Now it starts off with a cool Scarface sample and is followed by a real harmonizing sort of humming noise. It's a beat that's really, really hard to forget, I ain't gonna lie to you. And it might just be one of my favorites on the entire album. But the bad part is, Drake don't help none of it. Now, I'm gonna just put this out here. I'm no tough guy. I ain't no gangster. I ain't none of that. But dude, Drake ain't either. And he should stop trying to have that persona in his records because it does not resonate. I don't care how many photos he has with Jay Prince or any other gangsters or anything else that's out there. It doesn't change anything. He's not a gangster, and Daylight is a good example of why he shouldn't try to be a gangster on wax. And then also, this was Drake's first attempt at making a song that you could tell was for the younger generation. He tried it, but it did not work. And in all honesty, it really made me start to think, how did Drake come up with the concept of this album? But on the bright side, Drake's son Adonis made his hip-hop debut, and based on the sound of it, she won't be long before he starts sounding like his pops. I'm just saying. But thankfully, though, track 6 was a banger. And this was honestly the song that I was probably the most anxious for throughout this whole album. And that is First Person Shooter featuring J. Cole. Now, this collaboration is something that the world has been waiting for a decade. And it surely did not disappoint. Now, after the first listen, the song felt like it was two totally different songs kind of fused together. However, the more I heard it, the more I realized, no, this song actually showcases both artists' strength. And it starts with J. Cole, who takes the lead on this real knocking beat, which has become a J. Cole staple over the last few years. And the bars, man, the absolute bars. Then, on the other hand, you got Drake, who chose to go onto a more darker, menacing, Memphis-sounding beat, which in a lot of ways, he's kind of mastered on his own within the last few years. And you could feel the energy between the two, and this was the first song on the album where it seemed like Drake felt kind of motivated by something. But that motivation clearly did not last long, because the next song, I Don't Give a Fuck, featuring Yeet, boy, oh boy. So the song starts out with a Sade sample, and I'm always here for Sade. But once again, the track feels like Drake is trying to fit into a mold that he is just not meant to be in. The beat style, considering his age, it just doesn't work. And as for Yeet, he sounded like every auto-tune rapper I've heard over the last 4 to 5 to 6 to however many years. And honestly, it just did not work for me. So in my book, I Don't Give a Fuck is a completely skippable track. And honestly, it was the track that almost made me tap out. However, I'm glad that I didn't tap out, because this next track is absolute gold. And that track is 7969 Santa. Now, from the get-go, it's a real euphoric ride, blending a chill ambiance with a pace that keeps you absolutely hooked. This is where we get somewhat of a glimpse of the old Drake. And you could tell that we got a glimpse of the old Drake, because man, oh man. This song, you take a deep dive into Drake's mind, exploring this weird sort of complex relationship that he's having. Now, based on the lyrics, it seems like he's kind of in control of some sort of issue that he's dealing with, but he's unable to pull away from whatever it is that this woman has over him. And adding the Chief Keef's I don't like sort of samples or effects to it, it just adds a whole nother level, and it showcases how much he really disapproves of everything that's going on. And it really adds an emotional layer to the song. Then there's a beat switch in the end leading to this real beautiful ballad from Tizo Touchdown. And it gives me some vibes from the Take Care era of Drake. And that's my favorite era of Drake. And I'm so glad that he was able to tap into that with this track. And it wraps up with this very interesting Snoop Dogg interlude for BARK Radio. And of all places to get a shout out, Chapel Hill gets the Drake stamp of approval. Man, oh man, shout out to them, because that is like the most random thing in the world. But next up, we have Slime You Out, which is the album's toxic relationship anthem and its lead single. But I do want to say this right here. Although the song sounded good, the first line, or one of the first lines that Drake said on this song, completely turned me off. But moving past that, though, the song sees Drake and SZA kind of weaving through this narrative, giving their own unique perspectives on a toxic relationship. Their chemistry is actually pretty good. While Slime You Out isn't one of my favorite tracks on this album, I can see the appeal for it, and honestly, I do think that there is a certain charm to it. We are on to track 10, and this is the start of what I believe is the absolute best stretch of this album. And it starts with Bahama Promises. Now, this track right here is honestly one of my favorite tracks off the entire project. And this song is so simple, where Drake is pretty much going into his feelings and talking about frustrations with a woman that he calls Haley. And the issue and frustrations that he's having is all because Haley fucked up his Bahamas trip. And I completely understand, because I don't understand how you fuck up a good Bahamas trip. But I loved it. I love this song, and honestly, it reminds me so much of Fake Love. Just the backdrop to it, the slow piano, and it's not a complex song. It just seems like Drake is more so venting, and I felt every word that he said through it. And so Bahamas Promises is absolutely amazing. One of my favorite tracks off this entire album. Next, after Bahamas Promises, we have Tried Our Best. Now, this track, much like Bahamas Promises, is very clear with its intent. Drake once again taps into an emotional side that he has, making us feel everything that he's feeling. His song is about his efforts to treat a woman right, only to have it blow up in his face. The beat is slow, pretty euphoric, and it almost puts you in a trance. It once again, it seems more like Drake is venting about something than he is trying to create a tangible song. And once again, this feels like the old Drake, and I'm a big fan of this track as well. Like I said this before, Bahamas Promises, this started an amazing stretch of songs for Drake. And now it is time to talk about my absolute favorite song off this entire album, Drew Picasso. Now, from the very first note, the very first line, you're transported into this euphoria once again. And that's like the running theme of all the songs that are really good, is where they put you in this euphoric like state. And now what sets this song apart from all the other songs, not only on this album, but in a lot of Drake's recent discography, is that This song, you could feel Drake's vulnerability in it with his tone and the simple but super effective hook. It's all just so captivating. And once again, he's talking about issues that he's having with a woman, but this song is different. You can really feel the place where he's coming from. And unlike a lot of the songs on this album, the storytelling is just, it's fucking brilliant. That's really the only way that I can put it. And it was a complete breath of fresh air from everything else that was heard on this album so far, other than maybe the last 3 tracks for me. And after Drew Picasso, Drake continues this kind of stretch of really dope ass songs with Members Only, which featured Party Next Door. And we all know that Party Next Door, Drake combo, it always hits. They've never failed with it. And truthfully, this song continues that pattern. They didn't take a whole lot of risk lyrically or anything like that. But the beat is amazing. It's smooth. It's soft. It's an easy listen. And it fits where it does on this album. Based off of the previous 3 songs, Bahamas Promises, Tried Our Best, and Drew Picasso. It once again, it just feels like another chapter of whatever story it is that Drake is trying to tell within this stretch of the album. So Drake comes after that with What Would Pluto Do, which isn't as soft or as slow as the songs previous, but it still, in a weird way, kind of plays into the element of the story that he's telling. He went from having the issue with the woman in the Bahamas to then, okay, I tried to work this thing out and it didn't work, to Drew Picasso, where he's, emotionally vulnerable and he's at this place now where, he's upset, to Members Only, where it's starting to kind of feel like he's about to bounce back, to now it's What Would Pluto Do, where Drake uses Pluto as a metaphor for Future, where it's pretty much asking for relationship advice. How should I handle this situation? The dilemma sounds to me, based off of the lyrics, like, hey, there's a girl that I, want to mess with, but hey, there's a homie that is liking her right now. What should I do? Well, what does Drake decide to do? He decides to do what Pluto would do, I guess, and have sex with the girl. But the beat is really infectious. It's a nice little groove, nice little vibe. It's fun. The record is fun after having a short stretch of slow songs. This picks back up the pace. And it wasn't like the greatest lyrical, technical song in the world, but I did enjoy it, and I could see this being something that gets stuck in my head. But after What Would Pluto Do, Drake decides to then tone things back down a little bit with a very interesting song, All the Parties, featuring, of all people, Chief Keef. Now, when I saw Chief Keef on the track list before I started playing this album, I was interested because this, to my knowledge, is the first time that Drake and Chief Keef have ever done a song together. And that's kind of a big deal. But sadly, the song just didn't hit like I wanted it to. Chief Keef wasn't on the song very long. He had, this one brief hook, and that was kind of it, which left me pretty disappointed. Drake, he didn't really add a lot to this song either. I felt like lyrically and even emotionally, he just wasn't really there the same way that he was on the songs previous. Because even What Would Pluto Do, where it's a fun, upbeat sort of song, you could tell that Drake emotionally was invested in the song. All the Parties, things kind of switched back a little bit. And yeah, I mean, the beat switch was cool. The hook was a little catchy, but it just wasn't something that truly hit for me the way that I was hoping for. But the highlight of this song was George Clinton at the end doing his drop for Bark Radio, where he was talking about the roof and doing things with the roof, which I thought was pretty funny. But in all honesty, All the Parties, it just fell flat, and the Chief Keef feature just didn't work the way that I was hoping for. So then we get to one of the more popular songs on this album, 8 a.m. in Charlotte. And we all know how Drake does on these AM to PM sort of tracks. And once again, he shines on this track. He's rapping, he's being very introspective. He's talking about life, in his day to day. He's talking about life on the road, being a father, all these different areas of his life where once again, you can feel kind of how he's feeling throughout this entire song. The bars just make it even better. Once again, Drake always shines on these AM to PM tracks. It doesn't matter if it's 8 a.m. in Toronto, 6 p.m. in New York, 4 p.m. in Calabasas. Drake always shines on these type of records because it ain't no hooks, no gimmicks. It's just straight Drake being raw and emotional. And lyrically, this is where Drake always shines. And for it to be 8 a.m. in Charlotte is freaking dope. Shout out to Charlotte. North Carolina apparently is all over this album. And I really love to see it. So by this point, I am at the midway part of this album. And at first, like I said before, the first 4 or 5 tracks, I was just kind of like, man, I don't even know if I can continue listening to this because it just didn't resonate with me. But then it turned a corner with me once we got to, first person shooter. And then after that, Behind My Promises, Tried Our Best, that whole little section of songs. It really turned the corner for me. And it left me really hoping, all right, are we going to get the old Drake on the rest of this album? And of course. Soon as I got my expectations high, that's where this motherfucker Drake decided to go completely left. So after 8 a.m. in Charlotte, we get to BBL Love, which is a very unique but playful interlude from Drake, where he uses BBLs as almost like this metaphor for love, I guess. It's weird. And the first bar of this song, where he's pretty much saying, until you've felt a BBW, you don't know if it's real, just like love. And although that was a weird thing to say, it was kind of a bar. I ain't gonna lie to you. But I'm not gonna act like I know what a BBL feel like, so I cannot judge Drake for having BBL love. But the one thing I will say is at the end, it closed out with Sade coming on, doing our own plug for BARK Radio. And it just added a little bit of class to this playful track. So since BBL Love was more of a playful sort of interlude, I really tried to give him a pass for that, But then we have Gently, featuring Bad Bunny, which to me, I question why in the world did Drake put this song on this album? First off, it's not in English. That's number one. So Drake is already trying to kowtow or whatever for a certain demographic. Next, Drake is the one who is not rapping in English. And I understand, if you can speak Spanish, go ahead and rap in Spanish and do your thing, whatever. But I'm sick and tired of Drake trying to put on these phony accents for these songs. It does not make any sense why it is that he's doing that. The beat sounded good. Bad Bunny sounded good on this. But Drake was the one thing on this song that I was like, dude, what are you doing? And like I said before, I this is a completely skippable track for me. I don't speak Spanish. Bad Bunny sounded really good on this, but I just can't with Drake, man. I can't. So Gently happens. I listen to that and I'm like, okay, there's a bad Drake song, and I try my best to move on. But next is a song that absolutely blew me away, surprisingly, and that's Rich Baby Daddy, which features SZA and, of all the people, Sexy Red. Now, going into this song, I had no idea what to expect. I'm like, yo, Drake doing a song with Sexy Red? What is he doing? But
this song ended up being one of my favorites on this album. Like the track, the one word that I can use to describe this whole song is funky. The hook is funky, the beat is funky, 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 funky. Okay, it's smooth. It's an easy listen. It gives you a vibe almost like you at a club or a strip club, more specifically, and it's fun. And Drake delivers some pretty simplistic bars, but it doesn't take away from the song. In all honesty, it's kind of catchy, some of the things that he's saying and just the flow that he's using. And then SZA comes in after that, and she kills it. She rides this beat with her vocals like it's pure magic, pure gold. And then let's talk about Sexy Red, who turned an absolute corner with me on this song. Seriously, she turned a corner. The hook that she does, it fits her perfectly. Even the unmixing of her vocals to make it sound kind of off, like it fit so fucking well on this song. And then even her verse, like listening to it, it left me more to be desired. Cause I'm like, yo, she really kind of spitting on this. And like I said, Sexy Red impressed the hell out of me on this song. And truth be told, I think that she has found a pocket with this type of beat, this type of flow that she really should stick with because it just fits her so well. And I have to respect it. I have to give her props. Sexy Red killed this shit. And yeah, Rich Baby Daddy is a sleeper. I can hear this song being played on the radio a lot. So Drake goes from one song that I absolutely love in Rich Baby Daddy to a song that I'm like, dude, what are you doing once again? And that is Another Late Night, which is featuring Lil Yachty. And in all honesty, I absolutely hated this song. I didn't see the purpose of the song being on the album. The beat was cool. Like, I had no problem with the beat. It sounded good, but once again, Drake trying to rap over younger sounding beats. And it just did not work. He did not fit. His flow didn't fit. Yachty, even at the end, his verse, it didn't fit. And, I don't have a problem with Yachty. I honestly think Yachty is probably a really, really nice guy. But his music is just straight up not for me. And Drake trying to fit the same pocket as Yachty, it absolutely did not work for me. And this is one of the more skippable songs on this album because it's just not it, champ. Like Drake this is not it. And so after Another Late Night, I in a lot of ways kind of checked out. This was song 21 out of 23 songs. And once I heard that, I was like, yeah, no, the rest of this album probably there's no way these last two songs are good. But I was actually wrong. And I'm talking about Away From Home and Polar Opposites, which are testaments to the old Drake. He's giving back that real signature style that he has where he's being real introspective, being real melodic, and once again, tapping into his emotional range, which I think is always going to be Drake at his best. But sadly, these two songs are so far into the album that I think a lot of people might just skip out on these songs. But in all honesty and all truth, Away From Home and Polar Opposites are definitely two hidden gems on this album, and they fit very, very well with some of the other songs that I liked on this album. So now that I have did a complete deep dive of For All the Dogs, going song for song, it's time to unpack this album. So, like I said in the beginning, Drake was really hyping up that For All the Dogs will be the appearance of the old Drake, a Drake that we all know and that we all love. And in all honesty, Drake showed a lot of glimpses of that throughout this project, but the album as a whole just was not hitting for me. First off, the album was entirely too long. There's no reason why Drake needs to feel like he has to drop 23 songs on an album. It doesn't make sense. He doesn't have to oversaturate the market with music like that, because no matter what, Drake is always going to find a hit somewhere. The second issue that I had with this album was that the parts that were really good on this album were fucking amazing. They were absolutely brilliant Drake songs. But the songs that were bad on this album were some of the worst Drake songs that I have ever heard. Like, they didn't fit the aesthetic of the album. He doesn't fit on those tracks because they're clearly younger sounding and feeling tracks. And it just didn't hit for me, in all honesty. So if I had to give a grade for this album, I would give For All the Dogs 2.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said before, the parts of this album that I liked, I fucking loved. But the parts of the album that I didn't, I fucking hated. And that's really the only way that you could put this into perspective. But in terms of my favorite tracks off this album, Drew Picasso is quickly moved into one of my favorite all-time Drake songs. Bahamas Promises is also an amazing song. And then you have 8 a.m. in Charlotte, which is dope, okay? But on the other side, the songs that I did not like, I Don't Give a Fuck. I hated that song. I don't give a fuck about that song. How about that? Amen, which I understand what Drake was trying to do. It just didn't fit at all. He doesn't fit trying to make religious sort of conceptual songs. It doesn't work for him. And then Gently, which, simply put, it's in Spanish, 1, and 2, this was a song where Drake tried to use an accent, speak how he doesn't speak. And I think all three of those songs kind of sum up the biggest issue with this album, which is it lacks cohesion from top to bottom. There's parts where it's like, okay, all right, you got a little stretch here where it's like, okay, I'm feeling you, Drake. I understand what it is that you're trying to get out there. But then there's other parts where it's like, dude, you are literally throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I can't rock with that. So that has been my breakdown and my review of For All the Dogs. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Did you like this album? Did you not? How would you rate this album out of 5 stars? And yeah, that's all for me. That's been For All the Dogs Drake album review. It's been your boy Brody. Thank y'all as always for tapping into the Broadcast Network. And I'll catch y'all later. Peace.